All right, guys, so here we have my first interview with Ryan and Steven at Breakout Sports. I hope you enjoy. So, welcome back, everyone. It's James at Elite Hunters here with Ryan and Steve at Breakout Sports. We were hanging out today, having a blast at the Dallas Card Show, and I'm basically gonna have my first interview on my channel. So, guys, do you want to introduce yourself to my audience?
Hey, how's it going? I'm Ryan.
Hi, my name is Steven Lazar, and together we're Breakout Sports.
All right, so my first question to you guys is, how did you guys meet?
So yeah, we first met in an organization called Night Runners. Me and Steven both went to University of Central Florida and into running. And from there found out that Steven also collects baseball cards.
Yeah, and I had basically from there, how I got into cards was also influenced from my dad, and then I'd also through basketball camps been always like playing with cards, and either when I was a kid I either had Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon or some of the sort. So Ryan and I also found that commonality along with running, and then we came together and tell us about like how we created Breakout Sports and everything.
That's cool. So what this better describes your content that they'll be finding in your channel if they decide to go over to Breakout Sports?
So yeah, every weekend we end up going to a card show throughout the state of Florida or even out of state, like Dallas right now. So you can expect at least one of those videos every single week. On top of that, we do make other informational type videos talking about like what players are very good investments long term, where the market is currently at, and sort of like the best rookie cards alongside with that. Each week we also showcase what we buy, whether it's a collection or off of eBay.
Yeah, we also we try to do a good job also with our website that we have called breakoutsportscards.com. We'll go ahead and make a compilation of all of the sports card shows that are around America, and we try to update it to keep it as best for you guys as much as we can. And I know it's hard sometimes, especially if you're in a certain state that doesn't have a lot of them. So we want to be able to basically go ahead and let you know when they're happening in whatever state you're in, so you can get out there, be safe, and have fun.
And now, Steve, you said you got into the hobby was when you were at the ball field and because of sports, right? Is that what you got into hobby, and your dad, you said?
Yeah, so my dad always had a little bit of an influence because he did tell me about like baseball cards, and he had like pretty valuable baseball cards. And how I got into it was playing basketball. It was actually over the summer at basketball camp. They used to give out these cards, and because I had a past, collecting Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon cards, I had come a real liking to them. But it wasn't until later that I figured out a lot of those cards were technically in the junk wax, like Fleer 92, 93, but they're still really cool cards, and I still tried to always collect the best players and everything. So now it feels so awesome to come into the hobby and then get those cards that I always dreamed of getting, the ones that are always too expensive for me, that now sometimes I'll have the amount of money to really go ahead and purchase them.
And Brian, what got you into the hobby?
Yeah, so I was kind of forced into the hobby. My name is Ryan Nolan, so based off of Nolan Ryan, I'm from a baseball family. My dad actually owned a card store at one point,
Wow.
and he ended up selling that card store before I was born, but he was always really into sports cards, and I know he started taking me to the flea market. I went to a place called the Oldsmar Flea Market. It's kind of near Clearwater in Tampa Bay area, and I was probably like maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, I don't know, really, really small. And I started getting into cards. And way back then, I had no idea what cards were. I just wanted shiny cards and numbered cards, and really enjoyed that. But as I started getting older and started getting appreciation of vintage cards and everything out there, I really fell in love with the hobby, especially starting in high school. During that time was, 2012, 2011. I was buying a lot of Mike Stanton cards and Manny Machado cards. A lot of modern stuff rather than vintage, but I started learning the markets really well and found it really interesting.
Wow. So for all those that don't know, we met at the November Dallas Card Show, and they decided to ask me when they saw me looking at vintage cards, like, what do I look for in vintage cards? Why do I collect vintage cards? But ultimately, we just got to talking off camera and we clicked. So one thing is, I met them at a show, but they go to a lot of shows. So how often do you go to shows?
So we actually go to shows almost every single weekend. Luckily in the state of Florida right now, there's a ton of shows. There's the Clearwater show, which is pretty much the dominant one, usually about 80 to 100 tables there. Awesome show. Director helps out if you have any problems at all. So recommend that show quite a bit. There's also the Tampa Card Show, which is kind of like the sister show as well. That's the card show I grew up with. Another really, really good director, always helping out people. It's not as big as Clearwater, but it's really, really large. There's also a show in Apopka, and that shows a lot more vintage type cards. It's a lot smaller show, but you can find a lot of cards for PC there, and I have as well. I do drive up to Jacksonville every once in a while. There's 2 or 3 different shows up there. There's one at actually a sports card show or sports card store, and then there's another one at a convention center. Pretty good shows overall, but not like the Clearwater or Tampa show or Apopka.
And I do want to add a little bit on that. There's also, even with those bigger ones in mind, there are some other shows available sometimes. Like we'll go to, I believe it's American Legion for the show in Sebastian, Florida. And I've also, because I'm from Miami, and sometimes from semester break, I'll go down to basically stay in Miami, and then I'll go up to West Palm sometimes for that card show too, which is pretty cool. So I've had a fun time really going all around basically Florida and just seeing what they've got and seeing how like different areas value different cards, and basically get to diversify even what I have too into my personal collection as well.
So guys, I just want to ask each one of you, what would you say is your collecting style? I guess starting with Ryan.
Yeah, so my main collecting style is Hall of Famers. And I know that's very, very broad, but it really depends on the era and what type of cards. So you take it, for example, of like 60s, 70s cards or earlier. I like collecting higher grade Hall of Fame cards. They don't necessarily have to be rookie year. If it's a second or third year, it's still a high grade. I want that for my collection. But with the modern stuff, it has to be a rookie year, and even especially with modern stuff, it has to be a numbered card. It can't just be a base because there's so plentiful out there.
And Steve?
And for, I guess my type of collecting style is I do like some cards that I guess some would be considered to be some modern basketball cards, but they're really before all of the basically Panini era. With now that there's a lot of these base cards printed out, I try to get stuff from around, I would say around 2009, 2010, and then earlier on from there. And then earlier on as in like before that point. So I like to grab a lot of stuff like, especially like LeBron, Kevin Durant, even some like Steph Curry stuff. And I think those are also pretty cool because the market wasn't huge then, so there's still some of those really nice cards around. They do hold some pretty nice value. As well as that, I do like to collect legends in any sport. I also do have some stuff in baseball as well, and do like to every time if I can see like a Hall of Famer rookie for a great price, I will try to pick it up because I think that's just basically a part of baseball history.
Now, Steve, I'm going to ask you something. It's maybe like a 2-part question. And it's basically, you already explained what's your collecting style. I want to know, the viewers want to know, what's your top 3 cards? And maybe out of those top 3, which is your most expensive card?
Ooh, the top 3. Okay, so I'm going to go with my top 3 expensive cards. I'm going to start out, my first one, I would say I do have a Jordan sticker rookie, and I'm actually really blessed to have that. I had gotten that, actually I believe off OfferUp. I met someone, and at the time, I believe they were selling for around $1,000, and I was able to get it, I believe, for $600. And I'm really happy I did, and I knew it was a personal collection card, as one that I was going to hold, and I might hold for the rest of my life. It's something I just picked up recently, the Magic, Dr. J, and Bird, with the Bird and the Magic being the rookie card, but it's kind of a trio there in the 1980 top set.
I love that card, actually.
Oh yeah, it is a beautiful card. I think it's a holy grail of basketball, and I got it in a PSA 7, which I'm super psyched about. And I basically just caught it at the right time, and it just so happened that right after I got it, those cards didn't appreciate in value, but it's something that I really like, and I think it's just a beautiful card, and a lot of those have what's called PD, which is like a little printing defect, and they look like little snowflakes on the card, so the fact that mine doesn't have that, I think is really awesome, and that's why it is number 2. And then number 1 is a card that I actually have out to sell at PWCC right now, but it is a Blaine's Charizard first edition PSA 10 with a hollow swirl on it, and I think this card is pretty cool because I actually got it here at Dallas in November, and I got it raw, and I saw this potential with it I looked at the card, I was like, wow, there's very few to no flaws with this card. So I'm just gonna go in, I'm gonna pay the express money. I'm gonna go ahead and get it graded, basically. And a funny story with that, little story within a story, is that they had once emailed me and said, hey, you didn't pay us enough money. And I was very confused to what happened there. And they were like, yeah, you didn't appropriate the max value correctly. And it turned out that the reason why was because it came back at 10. I guess I thought it was going to come back at 9. So I thought that was just pretty funny right there. And I was like, yeah, sure, you can take my money there. Like, I don't mind at all.
Ryan?
Yeah, so I'll go over my top 3 vintage, and then I'll throw also in one modern card that I have. So my 3 vintage cards that I really like is the 64 Pete Rose. That's his first card by himself. It has the Rookie Cup logo on there. Just a very iconic card. I picked it up at the Popka card show last year, and I think I could grade it a 7 or an 8. Being an iconic card and being Pete Rose, I think it's really cool with that. My second favorite is the Lefty Grove from 1933. I've wanted this card. Actually, funny enough, last time I was at the Dallas card show, I almost bought one off of a dealer, and I decided not to spend a few extra $100 on it. And then it was one of my regrets not buying that card, because you don't see it all the time. I also picked up that card as well at the Popka card show and really enjoyed that card. It was my first Scouty from 1933. And Lefty Grove, really underrated pitcher throughout history. If you look at his stats, he has over 100 WAR, won a bunch of ERA titles, and he won a Triple Crown, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
So you look at that as a pitcher, legendary with Boston, amazing career. And then number 1 is a Bob Gibson from 1959. When I was a lot younger, I used to play baseball, and Bob Gibson was pretty much the pitcher I idolized. The reason why Bob Gibson was just ferocious on the mound, he did not care what other people thought. He actually kept a log where he put like X's on players if he hated them or not, and then would throw at them. He didn't care at the mound, something that you can't see in modern day baseball at all. And you just not seeing that type of player anymore. I really wanted the Bob Gibson rookie card. High numbered card, very rare, and he passed away last year, went up a lot in value. But I ended up buying the card at the Clearwater card show, and what ended up happening is I traded 2 Tiger Woods rookie cards on top of a Steph Curry refractor and then a Carmen Electra refractor rookie card, and $100 they get a Bob Gibson PSE for. I was really happy to get that. It was a huge PC pick.
Talk about flipping cards.
Now, my favorite modern card that I have is a 2018 Jack Flaherty Bowman Superfractor. It's the Bowman Platinum, so I actually have the full rainbow of that. Back in 2018, I started looking at Jack Flaherty pitch, and the way you evaluate pitchers is you have to actually watch them pitch. You can't just look at the stats. And Flaherty showed a lot of signs of being like a Scherzer type pitcher. He was kind of ferocious at the mound and had really nasty stuff, so I went out there and started buying his one-of-ones and extremely rare stuff.
So where do you see you're taking your PC to the next level? Where do you hope to take your PC to next, right?
Yeah, so for the longest time, and this is due to me and my dad not really researching it, I've always been collecting anything probably 52 and newer. I never really researched the Gaudis. I never researched the tobacco cards because I always thought they were super expensive. There's a lot of counterfeits out there, which there is, but along with graded cards, I always avoided graded cards because I thought people wanted top dollar for graded and there would be no deals with it. But recently, I even say a few months ago, I really fell in love with some of the vintage cards because they're just very iconic. It's things that you don't see all the time. And I always thought of vintage as 50s, 60s, and 70s cards, right? Everything pre-75. But I never really looked at pre-war cards and had an appreciation for them. And now that I have, it's opening me up to a bunch of new sets that I never knew existed. In fact, just a few months ago, I didn't know, I know this isn't 100% vintage that I've talked about. I didn't know Topps made cards in 1951. I thought 52 was the first set. Look at this as well. This is a 1936 R312. Didn't even know they made baseball cards like this back then. You have tobacco cards, which I picked up in 1909. Roger Bresnahan, I think. Is that how you pronounce it?
Bresnahan, yes.
Bresnahan, yeah. Sorry, I haven't researched how to pronounce his name. I also picked up a 34 Jesse Haynes recently as well. So I'm slowly picking up the Hall of Famers from that era. It's going to take a while to learn all the names, how to pronunciate them, all the players, because now you're talking about all the way from, let's say, 1940 to 1887. So there's 60 years of history I have to start going and learning. And if you think about 60 years of history, that's all the way from 1950 to 2010. Now I have to learn all of the baseball players back then.
I'm still learning people's names today, the modern era players, so I feel you on that one. And for you, Steve?
Yeah, so the way for me to take my PC to the next level, I feel like there will be definitely a lot of like trading involved, because I really do believe that it's hard, and this is something I really want to talk about, like going to a card show. If you just like bring cash, like that's great and all. It's just the fact that if you keep using cash a lot of times, you're going to notice that you're going to start to be losing money a lot, you know, because that's what happens when you use your cash. But I think if you can have some kind of divide and set some cards aside as sort of a filter and say, okay, this is something I want for PC, this is something I like but I know I can get again, and maybe I want to, you know, sell it and, you know, kind of like take my profit as sort of like a business sense, and you use those other cards. And then what you do with those other cards, you use them as what some people would call trade bait, but also to basically trade up to your PC cards. And so what happens is eventually you get cards, and then you have certain ones that appreciate in a certain way, to where you can take those cards and then trade them, or maybe do a trade plus cash, which is something that's very typical at a card show, to get a card that you want.
So with that said, do you have any white whale cards that you hope to own at some time in your future?
Ooh, white whale. You know, I did make a video about like my top 5 cards. The first one that comes to mind for me is the 1986 Fleer 57 Jordan. It's the only thing that's just really tough. Is back in November, it was actually a substantial amount cheaper than it is right now, unfortunately, for that. It's also hard to, there's certain cards that are like, you really have to, like, I would have to put up some very valuable cards to get a Jordan, because people wouldn't, if you were to trade and do cash, a lot of the times people really wouldn't accept that. Like, they would want just cash because of, you know, the type of card that it is. It's like upper echelon. But eventually I want one. I would really like to get around a 6 or higher, but if not, then I wouldn't mind even having like a 4 in my collection, just because I think that card's so iconic. That was one of the ones when I was a little kid I looked at and I was like, wow, this card is super awesome, and I eventually want to have it in my collection.
And for you, Ryan, white whale card?
So my white whale card would probably be the 1909 Cy Young tobacco card. I love the pitching cards, and every year the Cy Young Award is awarded to the best pitcher in American League and National League. So I want to get the Cy Young card, especially because besides the award, no one's ever going to match his win record. With how baseball has evolved, pitchers are getting pulled a lot earlier. Pitchers throw every 5 days instead of 4 days, and people are getting pulled 90, 80, 70 pitches. No one's ever going to match that record. Cy Young pitched all the time, maybe once every 2 or 3 days, threw 9 innings at a time, compiled a ton of stats and a ton of wins, and I just think it's an iconic card.
So we're gonna check out what they scored on today, guys. Let's take a look at what both Ryan and Steve got today. So I'm gonna end this for now. This will be part 1. Stay tuned for part 2, where Ryan and Steven shows you their card haul from the Dallas Card Show. I'm going to link them below, so be sure to subscribe to Breakout Sports. And until the next one, I'm gonna wish you all happy hunting when it comes to cards. Stay safe and be blessed.